You've found the Backup Wrap Up, your go to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we'll explore a chilling real world case of a rogue administrator who tried to bring down an entire company. We'll look at how this IT professional managed to lock everyone out of their systems and demand a hefty ransom. More importantly, we'll discuss practical strategies to prevent such insider threats and recover quickly if the unthinkable happens. I talk about rogue admins all the time. Today's case is straight from his criminal indictment. I hope you enjoy it. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. And I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of the really important database that we had just lost. I do this so that won't happen to you. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap Up. Welcome to the show. If I could ask you to take a quick second and press that subscribe or follow button so that you'll always get our content. Remember, you can either watch us on YouTube or you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, whatever floats your boat. And actually now we're starting to do some short form content on, the short form sites like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. So we're just trying to get out there. And with me, as always, is the guy that I wish was holding my hand tomorrow while I will be possibly claustrophobic while I get my MRI. Persona Malianti. Let's go.
I think I'm doing better than you, Curtis. No, I definitely know I'm doing better than you at this current moment, just given your knee pains. But I'm glad you were able to get an MRI scheduled. And it's not that bad. I've had MRIs in the past.
I've had an MRI before. I've had one MRI, and I had it of my shoulder. And I remember, I do not consider myself, claustrophobic, but I felt really claustrophobic.
Was it one of the older MRI machines where it's fully enclosed? Or because they have the newer ones, which are, I think, partially open?
Well, they rolled me in, me in, and there was this big thing that was just it was just very noisy and loud and lots of clanging. Bang, 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 bang. And you're like, what the hell is going on out there?
And it's 30 minutes or whatever.
When will this be over? Yeah, it takes a long time. So here's what I'm dreaming. I'm dreaming for tomorrow. So it's tomorrow morning. I'm dreaming that they're going to go, oh, Mr. Preston, this is of your knee. Your head can be outside of the machine while your leg is inside the machine. And I'll be sweet.
Just remember two things. Actually, no metal.
Yeah, they asked me lots of questions about various metal things that might be in my body.
Yeah, no metal. The other thing is, I think if you take a shot of alcohol or 3 before they put you in, that might help too.
That might. I'm going to have a little trouble driving to the event if I do that. Maybe I'll take 3 shots and then I'll throw on full self-driving on the Tesla.
Well, you could still get a DUI for that, though, Curtis.
I know.
So at least you will now know what's wrong and what your next steps are,
I sure hope so.
I
sure hope so. This knee has been plaguing me now for 4 months. Or longer. I think it's been longer.
Because even when I was down there, your knee was hurting.
Yeah. And, for those who haven't had knee pain or foot pain or hip pain, I'm going to say all three, basically everything you do involves walking or back pain. Yeah. So I'm going to call it infrastructure pain. Right? If you haven't had, it's one thing of I don't know, your head hurts or your back or your hand hurts or your elbow hurts. But it's the stuff that holds you upright, and I don't know, because I feel my body feels, 50s. My right knee feels like 70s. and it just makes me feel like I just can't do stuff,
Yeah.
But so
listen to your body, Curtis. Listen to your body.
My body is saying, leave me alone. My body's saying, give me more drugs, give me the good stuff, which you can't get anymore. I'm like taking the max dose of naproxen, and now I'm augmenting it with acetaminophen because today just wasn't doing it. You think anybody listening cares about my pain? You think? You know what? If you care about my pain, then leave a comment and just put "I care" in the comments.
I think Curtis needs a hug.
Curtis needs some oxy or something. That's what Curtis needs.
Prescribed oxy.
Prescribed, yes. Maybe an edible. I don't know. It is legal here. Anyway, well, we are going to talk about someone who is having a very bad week. And his name is what? Well, say it again.
And it's a bad week, which is all his fault.
It'd be the chickens
right? Just to clarify,
come home to roost, as they say. This is 100% all his fault, allegedly. I should say 100% allegedly all his fault, based on a federal filing that we find. And I want to preface this. There are people out there that argue with me when I start talking about backup
insider risk,
and especially backing up the cloud stuff, right? And one of the things I often mention is the rogue admin, and one of the things that they often say is, "Come on, man! Does that really
never
exist?
happens.
That never happens." And the thing is, I can think of a handful of times in my career where this has happened. And this is a new one. This is a new one, and it's a big one. So when I think about these stories, when I think about rogue admins, I think, and again, yes, these are rare that we know of. Yes, the ones that are big in public are rare. And in fact, they're so rare that when I was trying to think of a really good story that's kind of like the one that we're going to talk about today, I immediately thought of this guy Roger Duranio, which is a name that I had to Google. And what I remembered that they called what he did a logic bomb, and what he was back at UBS in 2002.
Oh, right? I remember
this is 22 years ago. And he got a lower than expected bonus. And so he basically blew up the company from a logic perspective, right? He just, blew up a bunch of servers, digitally speaking. And he was, he was sentenced to 8 years in order to pay $3 million in restitution.
I figured he would have done Office Space style and just steal rounding errors of pennies from each of the transactions and deposit it into his own account.
Exactly.
That's probably better.
Yeah, no, he just sort of blew up the place. And this guy, the guy that we're talking about today, he did something very similar. And he just didn't do it. He didn't cover his tracks very well.
So who is this guy, Curtis?
Yeah, so who is this guy? So I'm pulling up. We have this is kind of cool. Again, cool for us, not so cool for them. Is we actually have the federal court filing for this guy. His name is Daniel Rhyne, Rhyne. So the first thing is we don't know the name of the company.
Other than it's a New Jersey-based company.
And they're in some sort of industrial type world. In the filing, they just refer to them as Victim 1, right?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And we also don't know what his beef was with his employer.
Yeah, we don't know. Well, we don't know what his beef was, and we don't know. Well, what we don't know is we don't know what
Motive.
his ultimate motivation was. Right.
Yeah.
There does not appear to be. There was no evidence mentioned in the filing of a beef of a read
Yeah.
of motive, and if there was evidence of motive, they would have put it in there.
Yeah.
It appears. What do you think the motive ultimately was?
Well, it's probably either. Well, given that he asked for money to be paid, I'm guessing that it was financial, that he wanted to make money from the company.
Yeah, the oldest motive of all. Yeah. So, what did he do, Prasanna, to get in trouble?
Yeah, so he came in one day to work and he decided to lock everyone out of the network, right? And out of their computers, and basically sent an email saying that your network has been penetrated and asked for a ransom to be paid.
Yeah, and how much did he ask for?
$750,000, which I think at the time was like 20 Bitcoins.
Yeah, they were saying it was 20 Bitcoin. Yeah. And how did he? You say he locked everybody out of their machines. How did he do that?
He basically changed the passwords on the Active Directory instance and rebooted it.
Yeah, changed it on in Active Directory, changed the domain controller passwords, and then immediately rebooted them all, right? And I mean, if you're going to lock somebody out of a system, that is certainly one way to do it, right? It's interesting. We often talk. We're in the middle of this series on ransomware. I found this story interesting, and so I thought we'd cover it. This is a ransomware, but it's kind of a lame ransomware attack because all he did was change the password and lock them out.
For a couple systems.
That's really easy to fix.
But if maybe he's the only IT guy or something else. He was the
core infrastructure engineer. What makes this story, is the additional sort of the stuff that we learn about how he apparently made this happen, right? And
from the court filings.
Yeah, from the court filings, right? Allegedly. Innocent till proven guilty in America in a court of law.
Yeah. So how did he go about this, Curtis?
Yeah, so it looks like what he did, and again, this shows mens rea. What does that mean, Prasanna?
Intent?
Yeah, mens rea, a guilty mind. That is the, thank you. So, mens rea meets guilty mind. So, he created they called it a hidden virtual machine. And they didn't quite explain, at least I didn't see in the filing, they didn't explain how he made a hidden virtual machine, but he made a hidden virtual machine. And there are a number of ways that you could have a hidden virtual machine, right? I can think of, like, if you just used basic virtualization software, you could install it on a physical system even, and you could run, like, just the kind of VM that runs in a desktop, for example. You could do that. And as long as you're not, I suppose in VMware, for example, you could create a VM that is not listed in the system.
I was thinking about basically if you're on a Mac, right, and even on a Windows, right, using Veracrypt or an encrypted sparse bundle, throwing all the data stores in there, encrypting it with the password, and now it's not visible or accessible unless you know the password. Right.
And so basically that was what he did. So he did all of the actual work from the VM, all of the remote
nefarious
the nefarious actions. The changing of passwords and the rebooting was all done from this VM. And they referred to it repeatedly in the filing as a hidden VM, and they didn't show in. I didn't see anything in there. Tell me if you did. They didn't have any evidence of like how he sent the email, but we just know that it came from an external email address. It was probably a Gmail, probably something
or a Proton
like that.
account or something
Or
else
Proton,
like that.
yeah, probably better. I mean, if you're gonna do something like that, you'd probably use a Proton account because they're very big on like privacy and security and stuff. Gmail, I don't think they're that big on privacy and security. They're like, we have all your mail, and so they know that at least we I think we know based on reading the filing that he had this VM and he did the stuff from this VM. Why do we know that? Like if you look at the filing, what evidence did they put out?
So there's a couple things, right? One, they know, for instance, when he came to the office,
right,
and when he was physically present, when his network was logged into the network, right? They're able to track all of this, and they actually have security footage of him entering, right, and sitting down, etc.
Yeah, there were. Right? It was like a building block of things, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like my favorite, and like I think you're right. In the pre-call, a lot of this is circumstantial, but when you put it all together, right? My favorite was that they showed. Well, why don't you talk about the web searches? What kind of web searches? Was he doing?
So my guess is he hasn't done a lot of these before, but he was like doing web searches like, what command line command should I issue in order to delete logs? Or what command line options should I do in order to change a password?
A password. How can I remotely reboot systems with the CMD command?
Yeah.
It was literally like, it's like he's on his laptop. It's like, how do I dispose of a dead body? You know, it's like,
well, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it's like very childish, I guess. I don't know what to call.
Yeah, I don't know what to call. I mean, yeah, so basically my favorite piece of evidence, so you have the fact that he's doing all these searches. He did these searches both on his laptop, that they ultimately confiscated, and on the VM, obviously, that they ultimately discovered. And again, this was my favorite piece of evidence. His internet activity would cease on all his internet browsing would cease on his laptop and would suddenly start up on the VM. Right?
So I know we talked about the circumstantial evidence, right?
Yeah.
And my thing was like, how do you know that he's not the scapegoat, right? He's not the fall guy, the patsy, right? Someone else is remotely connected, because we know RDP is insecure and maybe someone had access to his laptop and they were using his camera to spy on him when he wasn't there and make it look like, oh, he's the one who's doing all these actions. I might be watching a bit too many like spy TV shows.
I watch a lot of those as well. Yeah. Well, so it was a bunch of things, right? So you've got the fact that the internet searching happens, and again, this could be anybody, right? That the internet searching stops on his laptop when it starts on the VM, and vice versa. They have I think the ultimate sort of thing that ties everything together is that they show him entering the building. They show his activity on his laptop starting once he enters the building. They show that it stops once he leaves the building. And then they also showed, again, using IP addresses, they show that activity came from his house, the same activity that the VM was accessed from his house, and from an IP address associated with his house. I think if they didn't have the physical evidence of the video showing it, and I'm guessing time, like a time card or whatever, shows that he was in, that
they would have been harder to prove.
Evidence.
Yeah.
And this actually happened 2 years ago. This is interesting thing. This actually happened 2 years ago, but it took them 2 years to conduct the investigation and come out with this guy.
And now I think he's being charged with like 30 years, right, in prison for wiretap.
He's potentially eligible for 35 years in prison if he's convicted. So they're
For
doing
wire fraud.
Yeah, they're doing it as wire fraud, which is why it's a federal crime, and it's been filed in the U.S. District Court in the District of New Jersey. And by the way, it says he's from Missouri, right?
Yep.
Kansas City, Missouri, which is like, I'm trying to figure out how that works. Like,
remote?
Why did he? Yeah, no, it's remote, but it also talks about him going into the.
Maybe they have a remote office.
Yeah, maybe they do, right?
Yeah.
And we have no information as to why he would do this other than the thing, other than the obvious, which is money.
Well,
right.
And the other thing is the passwords he changed it to. It's almost as if he was trying to blame another ransomware crew or make it seem like there was a ransomware crew who was actually doing the attack.
Yeah. What was the
Frozen
password?
Crew, I think.
Frozen Crew.
So this all happened. How could this have been prevented, or how could the company have recovered?
Yeah. So, I mean, that is kind of that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do here, right? I think that.
Let's talk about the prevented first.
Yeah, definitely. So, when you think about it, this is why we push so hard for the concept of least privilege, right? Because you had one person that they said he was the core infrastructure engineer. And I think this is probably the case in many environments where you have one person. It's easy to give that person full administrator and full root privileges. It takes a little more effort. Maybe it takes a lot more effort to give them the permission they need to do their job,
and nothing
while
more.
also not giving them the permission to blow you up.
Yeah. And
Right?
that's the thing. I was wondering, like, it's hard to tell with his role if he really needed access
Right.
to those environments, if he needed the ability to change those passwords, right?
So-
Especially for the server itself.
Yeah.
The other thing also to mention is, I know you and we've talked about this in the past, is sort of the concept of 4 eyes
Yeah.
for some of these actions.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I can think of, right? So the first is, I know what I would do in the Unix world because I've done it in smaller companies. And I'm assuming there's something similar in, right? So the first thing that you do is you prevent, like 100%, prevent the ability to log in as administrator, like log in as administrator or log in directly as root, unless you're physically on the console of the system, number one. And number two...
And the reason you want to prevent that is because then your auditing doesn't work, your logging doesn't work,
Right.
You don't know who's actually
Right.
accessing this, all the
Right.
rest.
And, well, let me finish my full train of thought, and then we'll get to the why. Okay. So you stop them from being able to log in remotely directly as root or administrator, right? Number two, don't give in. So you have one, this is what I've done in smaller companies. You have one like root password. You change it to a value that no one knows. It's in like a folder. You know, how you actually store this is, you know, you have
It's like in a safe.
You have like a break glass kind of safe situation. How you do it is it just needs to be done in a secure way, right? And if that glass is ever broken, then you start the process all over again, right?
Yeah.
Because I've worked in companies where like the big boss says, "I want the root password." It's like, well, you can have the root password, but let's have it in such a way that you can't, again, like I like with the 4 eyes, right? That if this glass is ever broken, everyone is notified and we have to change the password and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So because what you want to do is you want to have you want to force a person to disclose who they are, right?
Yeah.
Because
It's
you want security, right, for transparency. So you want them to log in as them and then do things as administrator. You don't want them to ever log in as administrator or log in as root. And there are ways to enforce that in both Windows and Unix or Linux, right? For those, right? And why would we want to do that? Why would we want to? I mean, if they can just become administrator anyway, why does this matter?
Because at least you could start logging and tracing and auditing, right? So if you do need to go back and say, hey, who made this change or who changed the root password, then you know, oh, Curtis had logged in and he had done these actions.
Yeah. Now, well, couldn't Curtis just delete once he's become administrator? Couldn't he just delete the logs that you're talking about?
But at least that should be still traceable back to Curtis.
Yeah, this has come up with the sessions with Mike that one of the logs are king, right?
Yeah.
The logs are king. And that the best thing that you can do is to have a third-party logging service, right? So that all logs, as immediately as they're created, are sent to a third-party logging system. So that when someone does something bad, you can trace back to what account actually did it, right?
Because those logs are super critical in actually understanding what happened.
They did a pretty good job. When I look at this, when I look at the investigation, I follow down the PDF of the filing. They do a pretty good job of listing and describing in pretty good, because they have to use technical terms like domain controller. They define what domain controller is, and they define like what an IP address is and how they use the IP address to trace back to his house. I
still think he's a patsy.
Good luck with that. All right, so that's one thing that we could do. What's something else that we could do?
So another thing that we could look at is having multiple people who could take on the role of administrator or have that capability, so they could go into the system and change the password back or change it to whatever, right? There probably shouldn't only be one person who has this privilege, because just imagine, okay, in this case, he went rogue and changed it. But what happens if he gets hit by a bus, or he goes on vacation, or he's in the hospital, or da-da-da-da-da, right? You need to have sort of a business continuity plan in place, which also includes people.
Yeah, and it goes back to that, like having that break glass password. And like I'm thinking about how both Windows and Linux work. And I think that ultimately, like, you could probably he could change the administrator password, right? He could change the root password, even if he's not root, even if he's using sudo to do it. But if you had other people who had
but then
access, could they change it?
But then he'd have to kick him out of the role or the group, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think this guy was a particularly sophisticated
knowledgeable
attacker.
Enough. Yeah.
Because he's Googling how to remotely reboot a system. Yeah, so all of this is I think this is like a bike lock thing, right? Just don't make it super easy, and make it that if they do stuff, that you would be able to trace back to who it is, which ultimately I think helps lower the possibility that someone would do that.
I
go ahead.
Wanted to talk next about recovering.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see anything from the articles about what they did or how they looked to recover or how long they were down. But maybe we could talk about like potential ways they should have been able or could have recovered their environment without paying the ransom.
Yeah. So when you think about ultimately all that happened to them was that the password, like he didn't encrypt anything. All he did was change the password and reboot the system. So all they needed was to do one of two things, magically divine the password, right? And log back in. Or you can, if you have, well, let me ask you this. We say this a few times on the podcast. what thing trumps all security? My question is, if I have this, it doesn't matter how good your security is on your computer.
I have no idea where you're going, Curtis.
Physical access.
Oh, yes.
If I have physical access to your computer of any known computer type that I know of, security schmecurity, right?
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And so I'm saying they had physical access. And so they could have easily used alternate boot media, booted into there, go in and manually edit the password. You know, you could actually just delete the password, right? And then you log in with no password, and then you can, and put it back.
Or the other thing I was thinking is, if they had a backup, they could have restored.
They could have restored, yeah. They could
Active
restore
Directory.
the entire VM back to before, yeah. I think that, and we're going to discuss this more when we start talking about how to actually respond to an actual ransomware attack. You start by, sort of poking around and seeing what you have access to, and being able to access the system without, being able to put it into a clean environment, into a sandbox environment, so that you can access it without it, doing further.
Because you don't know what else is in there, right?
Yeah, you don't know what else is in there. And these guys, I'm guessing, they didn't know that that's what he did.
Yeah.
Right. But with some amount of technical know-how and physical access to the systems, you can learn things. You can look at it. You can boot it into, from alternate media, and then you can look at the drive, and then you can see, oh, well, nothing's encrypted, so why can't I log in, right? Well, actually, you know what? The fact that the server was up, but basically you're being told that you can't log in.
Yeah.
To me, that would say, oh, well, he changed the password, right? And we don't even know that could have been their response, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, we don't know what they did or what was available or how they recovered, because that's not covered.
Right.
In any media.
And so hopefully prior to this event, they created an incident response plan. And
after this incident happened, they now have a new incident response plan on what to do for the next time.
Yeah. And I think one of the best things to do is to, and we've talked about it before, is to, in advance, to identify a blue team that can help you out in such a situation, right?
Yeah.
And somebody who is good at doing this is somebody that can do the kind of things that I'm talking about, right? Well, let's try this, let's try that, let's boot with alternate media. Oh, well, look, they just changed the password. Delete the password, reboot, log in with no password. Look at that. I mean, you still need to clean it and all that.
Well, and for all we know, right? Daniel could have been part of the incident response at the company and just kind of misdirecting people away and being like, oh yeah, we should really go look at this or go do that. And no, we don't have access to this.
Which brings me back to what I think is the most important thing, which is, this is why you back up stuff, and this is why you back up to a third-party system, and this is why your backup system should have features so that even Daniel Ryan cannot delete all of your backups, right? This is why I push this so hard, is that it's really hard to protect against a rogue admin. Right? Even the stuff that we talked about, at best, you can make it a little easier for you to get back in, and you can make it a lot easier for you to identify who the rogue admin was, which theoretically would help reduce the chances that you would have that happen.
But you can't prevent it.
But you can't 100% prevent. If someone ultimately has administrator privileges or root privileges, you're not going to stop them from doing, bad stuff.
Hopefully you could limit the damage or quickly identify what they did and who did it.
Right. And hopefully, and also restore everything from before bad things happen.
Yeah.
Mr. Ryan. allegedly.
Maybe we'll have an update depending on what ends up happening with the court case.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. This is why I push so hard for third-party backup, for example, of especially systems like 365, where an ultimate, an admin can just blow up everything, right?
Yeah.
Either accidentally with what happened with KPMG or Musi, which we covered, by the way, in our I think, a great series that we did on all of these cloud disasters that happened. Either people accidentally doing it or somebody like this deleting data in order to extort money. Why are there bad people, Prasanna?
Because only if there are bad people can there be good people.
I'm not sure if I follow that, but there could be...
It's a yin and yang.
Yeah, it's the bad people help us identify the good people. All right, well, it's a sad show. This is a sad show, but yet another show that proves me right.
Yeah, and it is a sad show, but remember, tomorrow will be a happy day.
Yeah.
Happier day.
Happier day. All right. Well, thanks for the chat, Prasanna.
Anytime, Curtis. Good luck with the MRI tomorrow. And remember, deep breaths, don't move.
Breaths. And thanks to our listeners. We do this just for you. I hope you learned something today. If you did, throw us a comment on especially the YouTube or a review. The review would be nice. And that's a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.